Here to talk Cavs. I'm bringing in one of the best young YouTubers in the game when it comes to the Cavs, Tony Pesta. Make sure you go check him out on YouTube. He does great stuff, film breakdowns. He has the Junkyard Pod, all good stuff. He even does some live watch performances. Tony, man, this must feel like the most validating basketball season of your life.
It's been unbelievable. Thanks for having me on. As always, you picked a fantastic time to do it. The Cavs just can't lose a basketball game. Hopefully, that's not a jinx for their upcoming game.
I
We're
was about to
recording
say,
right before they play,
yeah.
but
We don't.
I'm
I don't
pushing
know when
it.
this video's coming out, so it might have to come out at their L. You might. I think I talked about the same thing with Cam, but yeah, hopefully we keep getting them dubs.
Yeah, I'm feeling confident. Like you said, this has been the season of vindication. As a longtime believer in the core four, listen, there's still limitations. There's still plenty of things to keep an eye on, but it's been a dream start to the season. They're 17-1. They're looking like the best offense in the NBA. They're still an elite defense. They have the best net rating in the NBA. It's just been incredible, man. It's been so much fun. I mean, you kind of hit on it. Kenny Atkinson has not been afraid to experiment and get weird with his lineups and just figure out what works. And Max Strus is a good guy to have if you have a chemist as your head coach because he can do a little bit of everything. Last season, we saw him average a career high in points, rebounds, and assists. He was really impactful in a number of different ways. The Cavs last season had a plus 6.6 net rating when Strus was on the floor. That was the third best of anyone on the roster. And really, when we brought Max Strus to the team last summer, we were all hoping that it would be like a revelation moment for this offense where the Cavs were unlocked by having a motion shooter out there with the core four. And that didn't really happen last year. They had a bizarre season for a number of different reasons. And it seems like JB Bickerstaff, to all his credit, he just kind of hit his ceiling with the team. But now
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing that offensive renaissance take place under Kenny Atkinson. And again, I think Max Strus just fits perfectly into what they have going on. He's a guy who he can handle the ball. He can defend multiple positions. He can knock down three pointers off the dribble or catch and shoot. One thing to watch for is how great Strus is playing off the ball in this offense. He's kind of like a much more polished version of Sam Merrill, where he's going to fly off screens. He has a natural instinct for making himself available, but he's also really good at attacking closeouts and beating guys off the dribble. What differentiates Strus from other 3-point specialists is that last season he kind of proved he's not a specialist at all. He can do a little bit of everything. And so again, to tie this back to Kenny, he's done a great job of generating advantages for guys all within this offense, Ty Jerome being one of those guys. And I think Strus is just going to slot right into what has already been one of the best offenses in the NBA. He's just going to make them even better.
Yeah. So, do you see them using Struce more like with the core starters? Like, do you think he's going to be somebody who might be considered to be in their finishing lineup? And like, I think this is an interesting question for Kenny to answer. Like, when we get to the end of the season, what do you think that closing lineup for the Cavs looks like?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And that's one of the benefits of having a core four is that you have different options to play with. I know it might be weird to say, hey, we're paying Jared Allen a lot of money and sometimes he's not going to close certain games, but Kenny has already shown that he's not afraid to do it. And sometimes you just got to put the best lineup out there on any given night. As far as Max Strus goes, I've kind of gone back and forth on it to start this year. I thought maybe this would be the year Dean Wade just kind of establishes himself as the starting three. I'm out on that again just because I think Max Strus, he's consistent, he's reliable, he does everything that you're gonna want out of that because you have your core four. And what you need in that small forward position, really you would want a real wing, but Max Strus, he's doing
Mm-hmm.
his best impersonation. Like I said at the start, he's a motion shooter. He's not afraid to let it fly. He's one of the best off ball players in the NBA. And last year, he showed a lot of potential on ball, creating for himself and for others. That pick and roll with Evan Mobley was something that I think was really good, and it could be even better under this version of the Cavs team. So I'm excited to see. I think he should be the starter, and I would expect he's going to close a lot of games just because he is one of the more experienced guys. He comes from the Miami Heat. He's already been bringing over some of that Eric Spoelstra, some of those philosophies to this team. There's quotes of him coaching from the sidelines and stuff like that. So he's a guy who I trust being out there at the end of games. And I think overall that experience and his multifaceted skill set is going to be I think it's going to be the fit next to that core four that we were hoping for last season. I think this year, Kenny Atkinson is going to make it all happen and click the way we were hoping.
Yeah. So speaking of Max Strus coaching from the sidelines, there was a fun little blurb about how against the Hornets, switching to that Miami zone, it was something that helped them. For those of us who might not know, what is the Miami zone and what did Max Strus contribute to that?
Yeah, so Eric Spoelstra in Miami over the last few years, he has really carved out like an elite zone defense that the Heat, when they made their run to the finals a few years ago, that was one of the key reasons. And the main philosophies and principles that Max Strus was preaching in that game against Charlotte was you're going to have two guys at the top of the zone. It's a 2-3 zone. And the goal is you're going to harass the ball with two defenders. And so if you
Mm-hmm.
think about what Charlotte was doing in that game, LaMelo Ball is having a great start to the year. He's a guy who he's a good playmaker, but when he's cooking, he really doesn't want to give the ball up. So what the Cavs zone was looking to do is we're going to get the ball out of LaMelo's hands and force someone else to beat us. And so that's what they did really well. And one of the main things there too is it's not just double teaming the ball without a purpose. You're funneling everyone into the paint because you have an Evan Mobley down there. So basically you're running guys off the 3-point line and you're getting the ball out of the star player's hands, and everything that the opponent is going to get is going to have to come at finishing against Evan Mobley in the paint. So he's your Bam Adebayo in this sense. And it's a natural fit. I will say the zone has had mixed results so far this year. It hasn't always been all that good, but it was really good against Charlotte. And the fact that Max Strus well, two things. The fact that Max Strus is taking on kind of, that sideline role is awesome. And I also think it's awesome that Kenny Atkinson decided to listen to him and try to implement something that one of his players could give him experience from a former team.
Yeah, it feels like a constant with like really good basketball coaches. They have this like Wizard of Oz quality where like they're not gonna, these are NBA players. They've been cooking their whole career. You're not gonna like draw up a play and blow their mind like in the NBA level. Like you're not drawing up something for LeBron and he's gonna be like, oh my God. Like he's run every play that you could
Yeah.
probably run, every action, any motion. But what I do think the great coaches do a good job of is figuring out how to empower their players to get the most out of them, right? Like, okay, Evan, let's get you the ball a little bit more. Let's empower you that way, Let's empower guys to shoot. Like, I think Dean Wade has been somebody coaches have been trying to empower to shoot the ball for like his entire stay in Cleveland.
Forever.
Yeah, and it's like empowering Ty Jerome to be like, hey man, if you're hot, just shoot it. Like Ty Jerome taking pull-up threes, like just because he's cooking. Not every coach is gonna allow that, right? But I think he has a good feel on like, okay, he's cooking. Let me let him go ahead and get his moment. And then he has a good feel on also like, hey, Karis, it is what it is. I think he should probably like put the kibosh on the whole George Niang thing a little bit earlier. And I think was that last game that they played where he went 1 of 14.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that was rough.
Yeah,
I think he was 1 of 13. It was real ugly.
But I think Kenny has really done a good job of empowering his guys. What do you see when we look at Evan Mobley and we know what that journey has been for him? It's hard to put a specific player to it because he's developed in such a unique way that there's not really a parallel to him in the league. But what caliber of star do you think you could get out of Evan Mobley, given what we've seen from him so far in his NBA career?
Yeah, I think to start the season, to me, Evan Mobley is playing at an all-star level pretty clearly. We know how good he is on defense. We've talked about it since he entered the NBA. He's one of the best defenders in the world. This year, kind of tying into the Kenny Atkinson theme, he's trying things on offense. They're experimenting with him, and we're finding out how talented he really is. Now, there have been mixed results. It hasn't been perfect. There's some growing pains, but just allowing Evan Mobley to bring the ball up the floor throughout the course of a game, give him those reps as a ball handler, let him run an inverted pick and roll where Sam Merrill is setting the screen or Donovan Mitchell. That's where Max Strus again is going to be really useful in having someone who really is a volume knockdown shooter who opposing teams respect, set a screen for Evan Mobley. You're just cooking with so many options there. And so Evan Mobley, he still has to tighten his handle. He's still got to refine that jump shot a little bit, but everything's trending upwards for him. He's only 23 years old. I still think this is very clearly an all NBA caliber player in the making. Again, there's still some steps that he needs to take, but the start of the season has been incredible watching Evan Mobley develop and watching him being used in all these different ways. And Kenny Atkinson, coming from a Golden State Warriors background, has already made the comparison to Draymond Green, just in the sense of how he wants to use Evan Mobley as an offensive hub. I think Mobley clearly has more offensive potential in terms of scoring the ball because he's so athletic, he's so big, he's such a fantastic finisher at the rim. But getting more out of him as an offensive initiator has been the goal. And up to this point, again, I think he's playing at an all-star level, and he's got more room to grow as we go through this year, and he gets more comfortable in that role.
Yeah, he's just so young and such a good defender so early that it kind of like makes people feel differently about his timeline. But I think the big marker for him was I was watching the Raptors, and like Scotty Barnes is a good player. He's not gotten much worse since his rookie year. But I remember like people actually having the argument, and now when you look at him, you're like, yeah, man, yeah, Evan's clearly the better player, right? Like he's clearly walking past the Scotty Barneses of the world into a different echelon, and that's not even considering what he is defensively. When you look at a dude like Evan, and I think this game's probably going to go up before the Sunday Boston one. But when you look at a dude like Evan and you've seen the production against Boston, do you think that in order to beat the Celtics, like, is it going to take Evan Mobley having a breakout series for this Cavaliers team? Because, like, I don't know if a Donovan Mitchell banger series does it against a team that can shoot as well as them. Like, do you think it has to be the Evan Mobley breakout on both sides in order for this thing to happen the way the Cavs wanted to in the playoffs?
You're definitely going to need to give Donovan Mitchell some help. I think Boston, they're such a fantastic, well rounded team that you're not going to beat them with one guy. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, yeah, I think Evan Mobley would probably have to be like your second leading scorer. Darius Garland is a big X factor in that series, obviously, because the way that they play him, they drop back on all of his drives. Basically, any pick and roll action, they're dropping back on him. And so, part of the reason why Mobley in that recent matchup, the NBA Cup game, I think he had 22 points in the first three quarters, didn't get the ball in the fourth. It's because Boston is very comfortable dropping back on either Darius or Donovan and just trying to keep Mobley and Allen away from getting the ball. So part of that does come down to Darius has to make them pay and hit a couple shots to free up Mobley. But Kenny Atkinson did say that he takes some responsibility and accountability for not finding other ways to get Mobley involved, which I thought was a refreshing thing to hear. And hey, if they're going to play drop coverage on Darius Garland and he doesn't have it going one night, that's when you got to start feeding Mobley the ball on the elbow or let him handle the ball a little bit. And so I think we're going to see some stuff like that. I'm really, really interested to see how they play on Sunday and just moving forward against the Celtics and what type of experiments that Kenny Atkinson will run. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, Evan Mobley, again, we know what he can bring defensively. He was incredible in that first game against Boston this year on the defensive end. He showed a lot of stuff offensively. I think the big key and something that more people should be noticing is that Evan Mobley has bulked up a little bit. He's starting to
Yes.
really look like a stronger player out there. Uh, you can't put a smaller guy on him anymore, at least not in the way that you could before. When Boston tried to put Drew Holiday on him, Jason Tatum, or Jaylen Brown in that NBA Cup game this year, he was just
Mm-hmm.
going right at them, putting his body into them and getting to the rim. That's a huge development and something that we should be watching for.
You know me, I've been on team weight all for this Cavs team for a while, right? With the size and the height and everything. I'm like, they need to get physically
Yeah.
heavier as a basketball team. It's going to be interesting to see how
Mm.
they handle a lot of this stuff. When you look at this season and you look at what the Cavs have already accomplished so far, is there something you peek at and you say, hey, this is a big test that I want to see the Cavs get by, like that'll really ease maybe some of your larger concerns when it comes to the season for this team?
Yeah, I think there was always a concern when you put so much effort into improving the offense, there's going to be a little bit of ground that you give up defensively. Right now,
Hmm.
they're still top 10 in defense, but they have slipped a little bit in the last 2 weeks. And they are one of those, they're like below average in terms of defending the 3 point line. And opponents are shooting, I think, the second best percentage from deep
Hmm.
against them. Now, a big part of that is Boston shot like 60%. So it's a little bit of an outlier. And we're still early in the season, so it's small sample sizes, but that's going to be a key because it has been a trend over the last 3 seasons. You have such a good interior defense that you want to run everything into the paint and just lock down that area, but you have to defend the 3 point line too. It's part of the conundrum of having Mobley and Allen out there is that they both
Hmm.
just have this natural instinct to protect the paint that we'll see guys like Al Horford, Bobby Portis, Julius Randle, like any stretch big is able to get an advantage on them if they're knocking down shots that night because Mobley and Allen just have it hardwired into them that they're rotating down into the paint. So one thing that Kenny Atkinson has talked about is rewiring them to understand that you have to trust. If you're Evan Mobley, you have to trust that Jared Allen, he's got it down there. You have to stay out on a 3 point shooter and vice versa. So that's something that
Hmm.
I'm going to be watching for. If you have a top 5 offense and a top 10 defense, you're going to be a title contender. That's where they are right now. We just want to make sure that they cover the 3 point line and don't continue this. I wouldn't even call it a trend, but just the last 2 weeks, they've slipped just a little bit. You want to keep an eye on that because that's the key here is putting it together on both sides of the floor.
Definitely, definitely, Tony. Thank you for coming on. Where can they find your work if they want to see more of you, Tony?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Like I said, it's always so much fun doing this. You can find me on Twitter at Tony_Pesta or Blue Sky, Tony Pesta, same at. I do YouTube, I have a podcast, I do film breakdowns. It's all under the same name. We also do the playback live streams for Cavs watch parties. So go check me out. And again, thanks for having me on.
Appreciate that. Tony Pasta, Tony Pesto, Tony Pesta. Definitely, definitely. Man, it depends on what New York team we're playing that week. What his last name is. I don't know why more people don't go Pesto, right?
Yeah.
Like, they must not be a large
Yeah, it's
Bob's
the underrated
Burger,
one.
yeah, split in your hater base, But maybe that's what I can contribute to the discourse. But appreciate you, Tony, for coming on. Make sure you check out all of his stuff, especially if you're a Cavs fan. I know Cavs fans are like, there's nobody making videos about this team. I'm like, there's people, maybe the algorithm hasn't hit them yet, but there's definitely people doing a lot of good work there. So make sure you go check it out. I think Tony does some of the best stuff on the platform. Appreciate you for being on. Appreciate y'all for watching. Y'all have a great day. Having a better night. Peace.